going to explore is the idea of building shapes in After Effects and using something After Effects calls parenting in order to connect our shapes in a way that we don't have to animate every single individual shape, but they all work together to form our finished animation. The easiest animation we can build in order to accomplish this is a basic walk cycle. Now, for those of you who aren't super excited about the idea of character animation or just trying to learn basic motion graphics, don't get too worked up. I'm not going to do any heavy hitting in terms of illustration right now. We're basically going to create a stick figure-ish kind of object out of circles and then make it walk. So I'm going to say new composition. And when I get this dialog box for new composition, I have a bunch of things that I've got to select. But the main thing that I'm going to do right now for the purposes of this exercise, just to get going, is I'm going to select the basic 4K dropdown, which is at 24 frames a second. It says 23.976, but don't let that throw you. And I'm going to set it for 8 seconds long. And I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not going to set it for 8 seconds long. I'm going to set it for 4 seconds. I'll say, okay. Now, I'm going to give myself just a little bit more room for the screen, and I'm going to say fit, so just so that I have more visual and real estate to work with. Okay, so I'm going to go up to my shape tool, and I'm going to click and hold on it, and then choose the ellipse tool. And with the ellipse tool, what I want to do is I want sort of a bright, cheery color. So in this particular circumstance, I'm going to choose a green, and I'm going to draw a little circle near the top, which is going to be the head of my character. And then I'm going to rename the shape layer head. Rename head. Okay. Now, just like in our last exploration of animation, what I need to do now is I need to make sure that the anchor point for this head is in a good place. So I'm going to go to my anchor point tool, pan behind tool, and I'm going to choose the anchor point, and I'm going to put it at the base of the head, like where it's going to connect to the neck, basically. Now, I could just keep drawing, but what's going to happen if I keep drawing is oh, actually, that worked fine. A lot of times when I keep drawing, it creates a it creates a shape inside of the layer that I've already got. And what I want to make sure is that each shape that I build for the purposes of this exercise need to be on their own independent layer. What I don't want to do is draw a shape and it end up being a second shape inside of a layer like this just did. I just drew the circle and it ended up being a second ellipse inside of the head layer. I don't want that. I want every shape that I draw to have its own layer. So the second shape that I just drew, I'm going to turn it into the body. So I'm going to rename it body. And its anchor point just needs to go somewhere in the center, really. So again, I'm going to grab that pan behind tool or anchor point tool, whatever you want to call it, and I want to approximately place it in the center of the body. Then I'm going to grab my selection tool and move that body up to where it sort of connects with the base of the head. And you know what? I'm going to do this as though it's a profile of the person who's walking. So I'm going to have his head tilted down a little bit now that I'm thinking about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that anchor point to where it's right where that neck and body meet. Okay, and I did that on the head layer. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a leg. So I'm going back to my ellipse tool, and I'm just going to draw another ellipse that sort of represents an upper leg. And I'm going to rename that guy right upper leg. Then what I want to do, of course, is I want to put my anchor point in the right spot. Your upper leg turns from your hip, so that's why I'm placing this where I'm placing it. And now I'm going to move this sort of where I see the leg in my mind sitting. And I'm going to go to my transform tool for the right upper leg, and I'm going to rotate this guy forward just a little bit. So that, you know, it's one of the stages of walking. Another thing that I think I want to do with this leg right now, and I'm going to go ahead and do it now, is I'm going to change the color of the leg. So I'm going to, on right upper leg, I'm going to Contents, Ellipse, Fill, Color. And what I want to do is I want to make this leg just a little bit lighter. You'll understand why later on in this tutorial. Now what I want to do is I want to create the right lower leg. And in order to do that, I'm getting lazy, so I want to work faster. So I'm going to choose the right upper leg, and I'm going to hit Command-C, Command-V. I'm using Mac commands right now. And what that did was it duplicated that right upper leg. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename it right lower leg. I'm going to use my selection tool, and I'm going to bring it down to where its anchor point sort of connects where the knee would connect. And I'm going to use the end of it to shorten it a little bit and thin it out just a little bit. Then I'm going to rotate it so that it looks like sort of what you would be looking like if you were walking, right? Okay, now I've got the two parts of my right leg. What I want to do now is I want to create my left leg. So I'm going to select both of these. What I did to do that was I clicked on the first one, I held down Shift, then I clicked on the second layer. That represents both sections of my leg. I'm going to hit Command-C and Command-V to duplicate them. Now I'm going to rename them both. Instead of right upper leg, it's going to be left upper leg. And what I want to do so that I can see it is I want to rotate it, but I'll get there in just a second. And then I want to do left lower leg. So rename left lower leg. There it is. Now, before I do anything else, I am going to do something crazy. And here's what it is. I'm going to parent the left lower leg to the left upper leg, meaning over here under this parent and link section, I'm going to select the left upper leg. Then on the left upper leg, I'm going to go to Transform, Rotation, and I'm going to rotate it back. That way I didn't have to move both things at the same time. Now, there are a handful of things that are wrong with this. The first thing that's really wrong with this is that both of the legs are on the same side of the body. So in order to correct that, I'm going to grab both of these legs and I'm going to put them on the other side of the body. The other thing that's wrong with this is just from the perspective of us being able to really see what's going on, which is the biggest part of this assignment, this concept, is I'm going to go to the fill of these and I'm going to change it to being darker. And I'm going to copy that hex code and pop that hex code into the other leg. And now I've got two legs, and it's really, really clear to see which one is the one behind the body and which one's in front of the body. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is sort of the same thing except with the arms. So I'm going to go back to my ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw an arm, and I'm just drawing an upper arm. Okay, now that I've got this upper arm and I want to change its anchor point, I got to be on Transform, not Contents. I got to be on Transform to be able to see that anchor point, put it in the right spot. Then I'm going to use my selection tool to be able to put it where I want it to go. And this gets into one of the weirder things that I want to mention about doing a walk cycle, which is that we kind of have to think about how people walk. And the reality is that when people walk, they balance themselves by reversing which limb is going in which direction. What I mean by that is this. My right arm is going to go, if it's going forward, my right leg is not also going forward. My right leg is going to go backwards. So right arm forward, right leg backward. And the opposite's going to be, the same thing's going to be true on the other side. So if my left arm is backward, my left leg will be forward, right? And the two arms are not going to both be forward at the same time. One's going to be forward, one's going to be backward. And one leg is going to be forward and one leg is going to be backward all the time. And we just got to make sure that we're keeping up with those opposites. So one of the things I'm going to do in order to make that clear is I'm going to go to the right lower leg and I'm going to grab its color. I'm going to copy that hex code and I'm going to go back to that arm that I just created. I'm going to make its color the same thing just so that I can see what's going on. There isn't like any real technical reason to do this. I'm only doing it because I want to make sure I can clearly see what's going on. Okay, now I'm going to rotate this arm backward because my right leg's going forward, so this arm's got to go backward. And I'm going to rename it right upper arm. Okay, so now I'm going to copy that layer and paste that layer. I'm going to rename right upper arm 2 to being right lower arm. And now I'm going to use my selection tool to grab that lower arm and put it so that its anchor point rests where an elbow would rest. And then I'm going to rotate that arm just a little bit, just a little bit. Okay, now what I need is I need the left arm. So I'm going to grab, once again, I'm going to select both of my arms that I've created. I'm going to hit Command C, Command V. I'm going to rename both of these things. Left lower arm and left upper arm. Oh, come on. Then I'm going to do that same thing where I go to the lower arm and I parent it to the upper arm. Then I'm going to go to the upper arm and I'm going to rotate it. Then I'm going to take the lower arm and I'm going to put it behind the body. And I'm going to grab the color that I used for the stuff behind the body and I'm going to apply it to that arm. And again, there's no real technical reason for this coloring. It's just so that we can really see what's going on. Okay. Now that I have a body constructed, the next thing I want to deal with is the rest of the parenting. What I want to do is I want to parent all of my upper limbs and the head to the body. So I'm going to say, I'm going to take the head and I'm going to parent to the body. I'm going to take the upper limb and I'm going to parent it to the body. I'm going to take the upper arm and parent it to the body. I'm going to take the upper leg and parent it to the body. I'm going to take the upper arm and parent it to the body. Now each of the lower limbs need to be parented to their corresponding upper limb. So the right lower arm needs to be parented to the right upper arm. And the right lower leg needs to be parented to the right upper leg. Okay? And so the only thing that doesn't get parented is the body because it's the center of everything. Now watch what happens when I grab the body and move it around. Everything goes with it because everything's parented to the body. And that's a big part of what we're trying to accomplish here. Now, the next thing that I want to say about this is now we need to begin the process of actual animation. So I'm going to demonstrate animating this in an extremely efficient way. And before I start doing that, I want to talk about what's about to happen. what's going to happen is this. I'm going to basically animate one one cycle of the limbs moving in the direction they're supposed to move, and then I'm going to copy and paste that all the way out. So I'm going to start with that right upper leg, this first thing that I drew. And what I want to do with it is on frame 0, I want to create a rotation keyframe for it at 0 seconds. And by the way, I guess I can probably do both legs at the same time. Let's do it that way. So I'm going to go to the left upper leg at the same time, and I'll make sure that I'm only looking at the transform controls. I don't want to be looking at the contents. I only want to be looking at the transform controls. And so on it, I'm also going to give myself a rotation keyframe on 0. Now at frame 12, I want for all of this to be reversed, right? So on the right upper leg, I'm going to rotate it back in the position of the left leg, and I'm going to rotate the left leg into the position of where the right leg was. So watch what happens. I'm going to go back to 0, right? Now I'm going to grab that first keyframe I made, I'm going to copy it, and at 1 second exactly, I'm going to drop it again. Same deal for the other leg. So here's what's happening now for over 1 second. Now, that looks pretty stiff and it's not great, but it's the beginning of the walk cycle. And what I really need to do is I need to duplicate that a number of times. So I'm going to grab the second keyframe and I'm going to put it here. Then I'm going to grab all the keyframes again and I want to put them here. I'm going to grab that very first keyframe. I'm going to put it at the very end, but at the very end, I'm going to nudge it forward 1 frame so that when it loops, it looks clean, just like in our interpolation exercise, right? Okay, now, there are a bunch of things about that that don't look great, but we will shape them up in a minute, okay? Now I'm going to collapse the legs, and I want to look at the upper arms now. And what I want from the upper arms, where's the other upper arm? There it is. Again, I'm going to only look at the transform controls. I'm not looking at the contents controls, just the transform controls. So at 0 frames, I'm going to put a rotation keyframe in on both layers. Then at frame 12, just like I did with the legs, I'm going to rotate the arms in the opposite position of where they're currently sitting so that they'll match what the other arm is currently doing. Right. So now all I got to do is exactly the same thing, is take those 2 keyframes and copy and paste them every second. Then grab the first one, put it at the end, and nudge it forward by 1 frame. Okay, now, part of what's making this look bad or awkward is that all of the motions between each state are extremely even. And what I mean by that is we discussed in our previous talk this idea of interpolation. And when things move, they don't move by just instantly, revving up and keeping a very, very consistent pace. What they do is they start off slow, they get faster, then they slow up again as they're getting to their next state of rest. So in order to make that look correct, the easiest way to make our keyframes interpolate in that fashion is to control clicking or right clicking on a PC, and I'm going to keyframe assist and I'm saying easy ease. I'm going to do the same thing with this guy down here, easy ease. And I'm going to go back to my legs and I'm going to do exactly the same thing for those upper legs. I'm going to easy ease all of the frames. Now, That's already significantly better. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to animate the body kind of moving up and down a little bit. Because what happens when we walk is this. When our legs get to the state where they are matching, our body has been lifted up just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is on the body, I'm going to give myself a position keyframe at 0, and at 6 frames, which is where those legs are meeting, I'm going to animate the body up just a little bit. And then by the time we get to frame 12, the body will go back down. By the time we get to frame 18, which again is the next time the legs are matching, we'll be up again a little bit. And now I've got 1 second of keyframes completed, and I'm going to go loop that. Again, I'm grabbing the very first keyframe, I'm putting it on the end, and popping it back one frame so that when it loops, it'll look good. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want just a little bit of give on those lower limbs. So here we go. Yeah, lower limbs. Okay, so I'm going to go to the lower leg, and I'm going to go to the lower, where's the other lower leg? There it is. Okay, so again, I'm just looking at transform controls. I'm not looking at contents. I'm just looking at transform controls. And what I'm going to do is on the very first frame, is I'm going to give myself a rotation keyframe. And then when I get to frame 12, what I want to do is I want to rotate these guys just a little bit more than they were rotated. And in opposite directions. So the back leg is going to go further back. The right leg is going to go further back. Whichever one's back is going to go further back, and the one that's further forward is going to pop forward. And I needed to do that here too. So let's do more here. And then I can take those 2 keyframes and I can copy and paste them through the rest of the event. By the way, there are easier ways to create loops like this. And I'm aware of that. For those of you who have After Effects experience and are getting frustrated with me just kind of copying and pasting instead of using expressions or whatever, I am very aware, but I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible for now. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing with the arms, the lower arms. Right lower arm, left lower arm. So on the very first frame, I'm going to, the thing going back, I'm going to kick back, and the thing going forward, I'm going to rotate forward. Okay, so now I'm going to give myself keyframes on rotation, and then when I get to frame 12, I've got to have the opposite thing happening. So I'm kicking back, and I am rotating forward. Then I am copying and pasting those frames. I'm going to copy that first frame, pop it in at the end, and move it back 1 frame. Okay, this is starting to look pretty good. Now, the next thing that I need to do in order to make this walk cycle work for our purposes, by the way, I'm going to grab that body. Oh, I just realized that he's, who cares? I'll leave him alone. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new shape layer. And on the shape layer, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm basically going to create a ground plane for this guy to be walking on. I'm going to put it furthest back that I can, and I'm going to change its color to being sort of muted, because that'll allow our character to pop forward. I think that color is too close to my leg, my back leg. So let me see how I can mute that in a way that makes everything super clear. Yeah, there we go. That looks better. Okay. So, so now I have a ground plane, and then the next thing, and I'm going to label this ground plane. Okay, cool. Now, Now what I want to do, just to make it super clear that this guy really is walking, is again, I'm going to create a new shape layer with a square on it. And this square really needs to be the same color as that ground plane. Because again, it's not the emphasis. The dude walking's the emphasis. And so we want to make sure we're always thinking about how our colors are helping us create emphasis. Ground plane isn't going to be animated, but this shape, which I'm going to call, what should I call this? I'm going to call this, I'll call it background. What he's going to do, and again, on transform, I'm going to go to my anchor point. I'm going to move my anchor point to approximately the center of that guy. What he's going to do is he's going to move across the screen to create the illusion that our walking guy is walking. So I'm going to go to my selection tool. I'm going to move this off screen, and I'm going to give myself a keyframe. Oh, but I wanted that keyframe to be on 0. And then what I want to do is about a second and a half in, is I want for that guy to be all the way on the other side from an X position. But I really don't want him accidentally like moving down or anything. I want it to be very very stiff. I actually want this one to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Mechanical in terms of the way that it moves. So unlike the interpolation of the legs and the arms that we have easy eased, what we want with this one is for it to be very linear. So we don't need to ease it at all. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab those two keyframes. I'm going to move another second and a half ahead. There's 1 second. I'll just move 1 second ahead. That'll be fine. And now what I'm going to do, you might remember this from that interpolation video, is that I don't want it to like move back where it was. What I want is once it gets across the screen, I want it to stay there. So I'm going to grab the keyframe where it's off screen, and I'm going to drop that keyframe 1 frame in front of where it starts over again. So it's like it's leaping. So now let's see what that looks like. Now the only problem is the background's in front of our character instead of behind it. So I'm going to grab the background layer and I'm going to drop it to being the furthest back piece that I can. And now I'm going to hit play. And that is a pretty decent little walk cycle for a like a stick figure-y kind of thing. And that is the entirety of the assignment. I'm going to hit save now. I'm going to call this walk cycle. And then I'm going to render it by going to composition, add to render queue. I like all my settings, so I'm going to leave them alone, but I'm going to say output 2, and I'm going to say walk cycle, and I'm going to put it somewhere I can find. And then I'm going to say render. Now that I've done that, I can grab that video, and there's my, whoop, it opened up on the wrong screen. There we go. So there you go.